Whether we realize it or not, we are at war with ourselves. Unless something has gone seriously wrong, and even when it has, most of us are trying to do good or be good. I think this is true now more than ever before, especially for those of us who are feeling the burden of all the world's problems on our shoulders. From a young age, our parents, relatives, broader culture or religion have told us what's right and what's wrong. And like most little children, we might have said, I want to be an astronaut or a doctor, a dancer, perhaps a farmer or an environmentalist. These aspirations have been fueled by our desire to have a positive impact on the world. Or is it to be accepted by those around us? But despite all our striving, especially in our adulthood, it's not unusual for us to go through periods of stagnation and great difficulty. Sometimes we're terribly confused about what we're doing wrong or what's going wrong, and we just can't seem to move forward. We might be having conflicts with family, friends, and work colleagues, perhaps recurring minor squabbles or even serious, potentially irreparable disagreements. We might be struggling to find a better job or hearing yet again how someone we really like cannot commit to a romantic relationship right now. So, despite our desire to be or do better, we might sense hidden tendencies or forces within ourselves holding us back. Or even if we do, we might blame something external for holding us back, which is, easily done, right? The key message here is this. I believe we must look into ourselves and be honest about the darkness within us and acknowledge that together with our ability to do good, each and every one of us has the capacity to do great harm or evil. We need to recognize that there is a direct relationship between evil and the excessive, rigid pursuit of pure goodness or the greater good. It's better to be whole than perfect. This will allow us to transcend whatever stagnant or difficult circumstances we are facing, and ironically, I think, to be better human beings too. So the call is this. If you are some version of Dr. Jekyll, trying to be a good human being and be accepted by others, either on a conscious or unconscious level, it's time to start gradually examining your personal Mr. Hyde. All the unwanted, dirty, dark aspects of ourselves, including any traits or emotions that we might be repressing or refusing to acknowledge. But let me be very clear. Unlike what Jekyll did, this is not licensed to unleash your Mr. Hyde and start acting on everything you've been repressing. The book very clearly portrays how disastrous that is. Rather, this is an invitation to hold that tension between our goodness and darkness and realize that when we are calling someone else bad or difficult or evil, that we do need to hold the mirror up to ourselves and see how much of our own selves we are projecting onto others. If you'd like to go deeper into this rabbit hole, stick with me. My thinking draws on a few great thinkers who have recently inspired me, as well as some interesting coincidences that have led me down this path. If not, I hope I've at least gifted a little seed of thought for you to take away and ponder on. Okay, let's start with the interesting coincidences. I recently felt compelled to reread John Steinbeck's East of Eden, a book that left a deep impression on me the first time I read it last year. I was especially drawn to the characters, the dark ones, who were morally flawed. There are some incredible characters in this book, and as with any good book, you do find reflections of yourself in them. Let me share a small passage from the book that indicates what pulled me back into it. John Steinbeck writes, "Humans are caught in their lives, in their thoughts, in their hungers and ambitions, in their avarice and cruelty, and in their kindness and generosity too, in a net of good and evil. I think this is the only story we have, and that it occurs on all levels of feeling and intelligence. And shortly after he writes, a man, after he has brushed off the dust and chips of his life, will have left only the hard, clean questions. Was it good or was it evil? Have I done well or ill? As I've been reading this book, I've been drawn to many different interactions between characters and their inner battles too. I don't want to spoil too much for you, but I do want to briefly share this exchange between a father and a son. The father realizes that after many years of being consumed by his grief and sorrow, that he doesn't really know his sons. So he one day asks one of his sons to sit down and talk about himself, to share himself. When the son is unable to do so, the father asks, "Well, tell me, what's your brother like then?" And the son replies, "Oh, he's good. He doesn't do any bad things." Then the father points out, "Are you telling me that you do bad things then?" And the son's really honest and says, "Yes, I do. Do you want me to tell you about them?" The father replies something along the lines of, "No, son, you've already told with your eyes." Actually, the exact words are, "Your voice tells and your eyes tell that you are at war with yourself, but you shouldn't be ashamed. It's awful to be ashamed." At that moment, as I was reading that part, I felt strangely seen by these characters, especially when the son acknowledges the darkness within himself, his capacity to lie and cruelly test those he loves, to feel anger, envy, and resentment towards them. He is very much at war with himself and endlessly questions why he is like this. And then the father offers a kind reminder that he shouldn't be ashamed. Now, coincidentally, I started reading a collection of essays about meeting the shadow, edited by Connie Zweig, PhD, and Jeremiah Abrams. The shadow, if you don't know what it is a psychological concept introduced by the eminent psychiatrist and psychoanalyst Carl Jung. And the shadow is described as all the aspects that we personally consider bad, or what our family or culture considers as bad, that we have repressed deep within us. So the shadow consists of any trait or emotion, and often negative, but it could include some positive ones as well, that we find unacceptable, that we sort of tuck away in a little box and refuse to look at. It's often viewed as untapped energy or potential within us. Now, another marvelous coincidence is that this book opens with a quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn from the Gulag Archipelago, and this quote happens to be my favorite one, perhaps of all time. The Gulag Archipelago is another book that cut deep into my very being when I first read it several years ago, and I think everyone should read this book, especially the abridged version, which is much shorter and more accessible than the 3-volume version. And here's a quote from that book. "If only it were all so simple. If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart?" That is by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the great Russian writer who spent nearly a decade in the Russian gulags, enduring some of the worst imaginable circumstances, and who has seen some of the most heinous crimes being committed against their own people by leaders who believed that they were doing it for a greater good. So we have 3 greats, John Steinbeck, Carl Jung, and Alexander Solzhenitsyn, all of them seem to be converging with one core message. They are urging us to look inside ourselves for the darkness and not constantly look outside for it. So often we look externally for the darkness. And allow me to clarify with an example. I'm sure you've met someone who's constantly blaming others, feeling like they're being wronged by everyone around them. They might complain about how their husband is too needy, their friends are not really friends, their neighbors are cold and uncaring, and their children are too busy to visit. These people feel like they live in a terribly wicked, evil world in which they are the victims. Now, the irony is that these people are incredibly difficult to be around. As Edward C. Whitman describes in his essay, The Evolution of the Shadow, these people are projecting the worst aspects of themselves onto everyone around them. This creates an illusory, evil and wicked world, as they describe it, which isolates them more and more from the real world. Edward C. Whitman says, "We imagine ourselves as so long pursued by ill will that ill will is eventually produced by others in response to our vitriolic defensiveness." How often have we gotten into a conflict with someone and thought, "I can't be around them, they're really getting on my wick." Perhaps they're incredibly competitive or critical or showing absolutely no regard for what we care about. I've certainly had these moments with family members, co-workers, and even my husband, whom I adore. The answer to break this horrible cycle is to be brutally honest with ourselves. We need to call these emotions and traits by their name and ask ourselves, how much of their behavior do I find in myself? To what extent am I like them? And this is not about always justifying their unreasonable behavior. As Whitman points out, some of our projected traits can be very real traits in the other person. But we can't build common ground and understanding unless we step down from the pedestal of goodness and being right and recognize that we too can be like them. It might shock us to notice how competitive we can be, even though we like to present ourselves as collaborative, or how we might be masking our criticism with endless questions, or how we're disregarding something they deeply care about and how we're not really hearing them out. And the funny thing is, we can't just denounce our shadow or what we deem to be unacceptable or dirty or evil within us. That is the rigid pursuit of pure goodness that ultimately leads to greater harm. The more we recognize the darkness within us as it arises, the more we have the choice in the moment to not act on it. And if it unintentionally comes out, we can simply acknowledge and accept our humanness and build common ground because we're now able to say, "Look, I'm sorry, I could do better." There is a growing body of empirical research or scientific literature that suggests that acknowledging and accepting our negative traits or emotions increasingly helps us live more fulfilled lives. I love it when John Steinbeck says, as Lee in East of Eden, "And now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good." I wonder if you can hear the tune of the ice cream van outside our house right now. I feel like it's wrapping up that beautiful sentiment by John Steinbeck beautifully. I'll leave you with an important reminder. Hitler thought he was saving Germany through the persecution of millions of Jews and other groups. Lenin and Stalin thought they were creating a model of equality, a utopia for the greater good, and millions of their own died of starvation and were forced to work in concentration camps. History is rife with examples of individuals whose grandiose sense of goodness and morality led them to commit the worst atrocities imaginable. But it doesn't need to be on such a grand world stage. Read Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky to peek into the mind of an intellectual who tries to justify killing a louse, a person this murderer deems useless to society. No one is immune to this darkness. It is within each of us, whether we like it or not, because we are human beings. We are not gods. The answer is to be honest with ourselves by asking, could I find these same traits within me? How much of this person's behavior mirrors my own? With this acknowledgement and acceptance, our own grandiosity starts to fade away, and whatever illusory gap we're trying to create between us and them starts to disappear. We start building a bridge of common ground. And there's no shame in any of this, because we become more whole, fulfilled human beings in the process of recognizing both our goodness and our darkness. In a way, we've come full circle on my last video on gratitude, where we focused on overcoming our negativity bias by recognizing the good in others, in ourselves, and being more receptive to positive things that can happen in our lives. In this video, we focused on recognizing our darkness within. By carrying the burden of this tension within us, rather than trying to stamp one or the other out, we are more likely to leave the people around us feeling sorrowful when we depart from this world, rather than jubilant and thankful that we are finally gone.